All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this with Congressman Mike Rogers. He's the Republican representing Michigan. He's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Also joining us, Jane Harman. She's president of the Woodrow Wilson Center here in Washington. That's a think tank. Former ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Thanks to both of you for coming in. Congressman Rogers, Mr. Chairman, let me start with you. Folks are worried. I understand Defense Department officials are worried, but let's have some perspective. The U.S. spends, what, about $600–700 billion a year in DOD funds. That's more than the next 14 countries combined, including adversaries, friends, NATO allies. So a cut, even a mandatory cut, is not the end of the world.
Well, the way they've structured it very well could be. You're going to have, for two reasons, just like the report you just heard, these contractors required 60 days out before they're going to lay off somebody to do notifications. That day's coming. There will be hundreds or tens of thousands, likely over 100,000 pink slips going to people saying in 60 days you're going to lose your job. Well over 100,000 people. That doesn't include the military folks who A, won't get paid, B, will be also laid off. So it has huge implications not only for our national security posture, but also for the economics that go with it.
But it has huge implications for defense contractors who are building new generation fighter jets or new tanks or aircraft carriers. The question is, can't that be cut somewhat in these tough economic times with troops coming home from Afghanistan, troops coming home from Iraq? Does the United States still need that huge, huge defense budget, which doesn't even include the billions spent through the Department of Energy on a nuclear weapons program or the intelligence community budget? This is so much more than the rest of the world spends.
Well, but there's also the reason the rest of the world looks to the United States for influence around the world, and the fact that there has been no greater force for good in the world than the United States. But think about where we are today. You have North Korea developing nuclear weapons, rattling their saber. You have Iran threatening a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. If they get a nuclear weapon, that's going to spread throughout the Middle East. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt have all talked that they, in fact, may have to go nuclear if Iran goes nuclear. You have Venezuela in the South South America here, giving us some trouble and certainly trying to stir up trouble. We have Al-Qaeda that is shifting around. Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. The problems aren't going down, they're going up. You have China, by the way, who is also threatening U.S. naval forces in the South China Sea. This is no time to start backing away from our strong national security.
You agree with that? Because, there's a lot of waste. All of us know, and I covered the Pentagon for, a long time ago, but there's a lot of money that's being spent on some very, very expensive weapons that the country probably could live without.
Well, Secretary Panetta just cut, I think it's $500 billion, or $500 billion or more from the defense budget.
Over the next 10 years.
Over the next 10 years.
That's $50 billion a year.
But he cut it carefully with a scalpel and got rid of a lot of the waste. I think more could be cut, and I think that our best argument is not always our military. If we want a safer world, the U.S. narrative has to include diplomacy and development, and we need more of those. But I think cutting it all of a sudden, lump sum at the end of this year in the way that we will if sequestration goes into effect does risk our defense. And we've seen this movie, Wolf. I was elected to Congress in 1992 after we cut the defense procurement and intelligence procurement budgets. Bush 41 did that after the Cold War because we thought there'd be a peace dividend. Well, guess what happened? In the South Bay of Los Angeles, which I represented over 9 terms, there was devastation. Triple PhDs were out in the cold, and we had to build back carefully over more than 10 years. And now we face, I agree with Mike, a dangerous world with new threats that we haven't envisioned before. Yes, we can get rid of some old legacy programs, and it's tough to do, but yes, we should do it. But we have to do it carefully, not in a, falling off a fiscal cliff.
But let's talk about the reality here. The reality is these cuts really, these pending cuts were never supposed to happen. This was supposed to be the threat that forced Congress to do its job, to reach a debt deal that would reduce the deficit by, $1.2 trillion. This was the threat. So Congress knew that this was coming, and there have been no real efforts since the debt deal kind of fell apart and since the super committee fell apart for any kind of real deficit reduction to happen. So is this just the punishment that Congress is facing because it hasn't done its job, Mr. Chairman?
I mean, I disagree a little bit in the sense that when the authorization bill went through, there was a pay for to make up for the military defense cuts that were coming in sequestration. So what you'll find happening next week is on the defense authorization bill, you'll find another way, and they have to cover about $109 billion.
I think there were several missed opportunities, both for the White House and for the Republicans in Congress, to push for Simpson-Bowles, which is the right template, in my view, going big for reducing $4 trillion. There's still time left before the election, and I think whichever party embraces this and moves forward adroitly has a big leg up in November.
Don't hold your breath for anything substantive to happen between now and November 6th. All right, everyone stand by. Mike Rogers is here. Jane Harman is here. A new warning from a top U.S. general about the latest threat to American security. We're going to discuss.
Quince, I think we're the most vulnerable, and we need to do something about it. And now's the time to do that.
General Keith Alexander, he had some pretty dire predictions. He's the head of U.S. Cyber Command. Pretty dire predictions about the state of cybersecurity in our country today. You have just pushed through, helped to kind of spearhead the cybersecurity bill through the House in April. So what is the state of cybersecurity in the states today?
Well, I will tell you that the government protects itself very well. The National Security Agency, the CIA, others, the FBI domestically, they do a really good job because they take the threats that they know they find overseas and incorporate them on protecting their systems. The problem is...
WikiLeaks did a pretty good job getting some State Department documents out there, didn't they?
Yeah, well, it was a very that was a very different operation. Somebody inside the system was reaching into the pipe of information flowing by and picking it up. It would be like water flowing through the pipe.
Bottom line, somebody didn't do a good job in protecting all of those secrets.
But more immediately, the question is, what about power grids and gas pipelines and real infrastructure questions that really affect American
Jane get into this conversation, because there's concern that bad guys out there could use cyber warfare to destroy our power grids, if you will.
There's no question about it. And we do need cyber security legislation. Keith Alexander's right, but we need it for two reasons. It's not just to protect the .gov space. It's also to protect and the .mil space, but the .com space. All of our information is compromised. We do need legislation. There's a dispute in the Senate about which bill is better. With all affection for Mike, I'm very partial to the Lieberman-Collins bill, which the White House has endorsed, but there needs to be a compromise. And the second reason there needs to be one is to protect personal privacy. We can do both things at the same time. Security and liberty aren't a zero-sum game here. And without legislation, that's not going to happen, and we'll probably have an overreaction should we have some major attack, which could easily happen.
Before the election?
I think so. I've had some great discussions in the Senate. We all realize the seriousness of the threat. You talked about somebody inside, the insider threat stealing, which is government information, problem enough. But 95% of the networks that are getting attacked today are private sector networks. So the Chinese are going in and stealing intellectual property, repurposing it back in China, and competing against those companies. Huge problems. Tens of thousands of jobs lost every single year for that one event alone. Then you have the prospect of a cyber attack. So they go in and shut down your grid. They shut down your ability to access your financial information. Pretty serious stuff. And by the way, now it's not just interfering with a few hours and they reboot it. They can actually physically break your machines now.
But the WikiLeaks thing was a leak issue, and we have a huge problem with leaks and with political declassification of secrets, which has gone on over numerous administrations. People die. Sources and methods are compromised, and I think we have the same view that leaking of critical secrets is a violation of our national security, and we have to do more to stop it.
Jane Harman, thanks for coming in. Congressman Rogers, thanks very much to you for coming in as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.